Hi everyone, Elisa with Jots Designs. In this video, I'm going to create another resin trinket dish and ring holder. I'm going to be using the standard epoxy from the Epoxy Resin store, 1:1 ratio resin, super easy to use. And from Dryer Days Art Studio, I have the red velvet cake glitter and also silver metallic powder. And then from Res, I've got some new transparent liquid pigment, and this is the Cranberry. Don't mind the yellow on the bottle, that obviously is not the color. And then for the mold, I'm going to be using Dryer Days, it's the large dish mold, and I love how they have the supports on the bottom to help keep everything from sagging down. It's a great quality mold, and I'm going to be using 10 ounces of resin to fill it up. And you always want to make sure that you start with part B, which is the hardener. And again, this is a 1:1 ratio resin, so equal parts of both. And you can see it's actually a bit yellow, so this is a little bit older resin. I've never had an issue with it curing yellow. It definitely does still cure clear, so don't worry about that. And you can see I'm just adding drops of the transparent liquid pigment. And basically I'm just adding drops until it gets to the color that I want. You'll never get it opaque, but you can definitely make it a little bit darker. And adding in the powder for the silver, I like to add it afterwards so I know how much I'm adding and gently fold it in so it doesn't kind of fluff back up. Same with the glitter. And I'm going to add just a couple drops of the liquid transparent pigment and color with the glitter just a little bit, so that way it's not just glitter in the clear. Then I'm going to add those in, and I made sure that each one kind of touched the mold, and especially the silver in the middle. I wanted to make sure that there was silver showing in the middle on the other side. And then I'm just going to take the heat gun on high and gently warm up the resin, and that'll help the bubbles come up from the edges. And then I've also grabbed my bottle of 91% isopropyl alcohol, and I got it on a really fine spray and just kind of mist that, and that'll pop any surface bubbles. And it's really fascinating to watch that silver metallic kind of move around when the alcohol hits it. And then I just added in the rest of my resin and made sure I used all of it. So 10 ounces was perfect. Cleaned up any little bits that got anywhere that I didn't want it to be, and reheat it a little bit with the heat gun, and then gave it another good spray with the alcohol. And I'm not worried about any divots or anything, as the alcohol does evaporate. And then I just took a toothpick and pulled out any bubbles that were there that I could see. And I let this cure overnight. The general epoxy resin takes about 8 hours maybe to fully cure. You can definitely tell if it's a little bendy. If it's a little bendy, definitely let it sit more before you take it out. You want it good and solid before you take it out of the mold. So I've got that, and look at that sparkle and shimmer. Oh, so pretty. All right, so I've moved over to my clay area, and I've just got some scraps. This is Sculpey Premo clay. And again, just scraps, so I didn't worry about color or anything. I blended it all in together and got it nice and conditioned and pliable, and cut it into fairly equal parts, but not exactly equal. I wanted them a little bit different in shapes. Rolled them all into balls, and then using the edge of my palm against the table, I am rubbing that kind of at an angle just to make it into a cone shape. You can also do it with your hands. If you kind of make a V shape with your palms, you can make the same kind of cone in there. I just find a little bit more control if I do it against the table. So I got all of those nice and shaped and coned, and made sure that the tops were round and there weren't any creases or anything showing. And then I cut off the ends because I'm going to need a flat surface, and then I also wanted to make a base for them. So I just used that extra bit as a base. And I'm going to start placing the cones kind of haphazardly, but where they look good on the base here, just to get a rough idea of the size that I'll need for it. And once I've got that general idea, take it off of the resin dish here and stick it on some just plain printer paper. That way I'll be able to freely move it around. Got all the cones on there, cut the base slab down to a good little shape around those cones. And then I just took some more of the clay, and I've got a little dotting tool here, and I'm just basically kind of poking at the clay and breaking it up a little bit to give it a little bit of texture, and then pulling that away and then sticking that onto the base. So that way the base will have a nice rough texture, kind of gives it a little more natural feel with the way the spikes are just kind of coming up. And it does take a long time to do this, definitely time consuming for all of this, but it's very relaxing. If you need a little bit of extra time for yourself, put some music on or a book or something and go to town and just basically fill it up. And once I had all of that, I wanted to make sure that I colored it the right colors. I've got some Pearl X Carbon Black powder. It's really hard to see the label on this one. And then I'll be using that silver metallic as well again. And the nice thing with clay, you can also use some pastels if you want. Just kind of scrape the powder or scrape it into a powder with like a craft knife. You can use that as well. Basically all I'm doing here is just taking the powder with a nice little paintbrush. This is a makeup brush. You can find them in my Amazon shop too. And just painting over the texture part and making sure that that's nice and black and colored. And then I coated the spikes with the silver. Again, just using the paintbrush overall. And I then grabbed the heat gun, and I wanted to make sure that that the spikes didn't just kind of flop over in the oven when I baked it. So I grabbed the heat gun and just kind of gave it a quick bake on the outside. And as I was doing it, I could see them moving, and once they stopped moving around and were pretty solid, I baked that in my home oven at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for 1 hour, and then let that cool. And then once that was baked, I wanted to seal on the powders, because if you regular use and wear, and if you scratch it, you can actually take some of the powder off and scrape it off the clay itself. So I wanted to make sure that was nice and sealed. So I used some polyurethane, and you want to make sure it's water-based so that way it doesn't get sticky. And I've got the gloss, and I just gave that a nice coat all the way around and let that dry. And I ended up giving it 2 more coats just to make sure it was good and sealed. And then once that was fully dry, I just took my craft knife and scraped up the bottom just to make sure the glue would adhere as well as it could. Could have done that as well to the resin, but totally forgot. And then I just added a nice amount of the E6000 glue on there and positioned it the way I wanted it, made sure it was exactly where I wanted it. And then just kind of pressed it down, making sure that it didn't slide or anything, and I held it in place for about 30 seconds. And then let it dry, and it's good to go. And so here is the final product. I love how it looks like those spikes are coming out of kind of a little sea of the silver in there. Definitely let me know what you guys think of this, and if you have any questions in the comments, don't forget to hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I am Elisa with Jots Designs. I'll see you next time. Bye.